It was Bismarck, I think, who said it best, who, was able to describe how driven and how powerful this woman was. He said, Eugenie is the only man in France.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And I am in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Don and Petie Kladstrup out in Paris. Introductions in just a moment. Yes, I am the guy that sold 17 million bottles and tasted 100,000 all by myself. Hey, have a listen to a show that's coming out with Jane Dunkley. She is a winemaker up in the Central Coast with this fabulous Australian accent, but traveled the world making wine, landed in the Central Coast, making wine for the Cakebread family. It's fascinating, but not while we're here. I'm here to talk to some old friends about a book that just came out. Welcome to the show, Don and Petie.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
I had a chance to listen to Jane Anson, the famed Bordeaux specialist, your conversation with her about your book, The Last French Empress, Eugenie. You know, I don't have the copy here. Well, and I appreciate you sending me a copy because it was great reading while I was on vacation.
We can show you the copy.
Yeah, show me that. There you go.
Yeah.
Last Empress of France and Petie Kladstrup and Evelyn Resnick.
Right.
Hey, where were you, Don? What was going on? Were you? Why?
I was doing my best to stay out of the way.
Stay out of the way. Yeah, that's right.
Hang back, keep out of it, and let Petie work her magic.
Sometimes as husbands have to know our place when we do that, right?
I'll say.
Yes. Well, this is an interesting story, and there's a lot of pieces to talk about, not the least of which is why you did this and about her, but you know, the last Empress of France, just the idea that she was the last Empress of France. Why was that the case? Now, just to set the stage for the listeners, she was the wife of the famed Napoleon III, the great nephew of the famed Napoleon general. But where was this woman all this time, and why haven't we heard about her?
Well, I think that's the key. Why haven't we heard about her when she did so much and was so important in the history of France, and yet seems to have almost vanished from all stories of history? But I guess the main reason is because she was a woman in a very chauvinistic society, and her story gets kind of lost as they talk about particularly the fall of the Second Empire under Napoleon III in 1870 during the Franco-Prussian War. So it's sort of that they don't like to talk about losers. We'd rather talk about winners. Eugenie was running the country at the time of the loss.
But unfortunately, she was considered, quote, an ornament of the throne. I mean, you said, this was a chauvinistic situation, and boy, did she suffer under it.
Yeah, she was really considered as nothing but a fashion plate, a decoration. She did everything she could to prove that was not the case. The main thing being that she got French women the right to be educated for the first time, to go to school, and even to earn advanced degrees. Before, they learned to embroider, they learned their catechism, and they waited to get married. That was it.
Was it always like that? Because I know that there's some modern times where, just the right to vote and the right to their abortions and all the things that go along with society are relatively new to society in France, but it wasn't always like that, was it? Was this chauvinistic society? I know it's very patriarchal anyway, but still. Was it always like that?
It wasn't always like that. And in fact, during the 18th century, France was the leader in feminism. It was at the time that her great uncle by marriage, Napoleon, came to power, that women really became very, very repressed in France, where under the Napoleonic Code, they were not alone allowed to own property, to have money of their own, to work outside the home. At first, they were the property of their fathers and then the property of their husbands, and that essentially was it.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
It sounds like
I'm thinking what how I'm going to take care of the royalties from this book. Maybe I have
Yeah,
to.
maybe I ought to rethink some of that. I don't know what common law is in Paris, but it could be a problem. Well, you stumbled across this story as I read in the book, or what I heard from your interview with Jane Anson, sort of serendipitously. It wasn't on the radar. I don't know if you were looking for a subject to write about, but
No,
it
not at
seems.
all. It actually came about because of wine. Don and I were working on our book on Champagne Charlie, the book on
Mhm.
Charles Heidsieck, the man who essentially introduced Americans to champagne. And he was held in an American prison during the Civil War, accused of being a spy. At the time, his wife decided she'd do everything she could to get him released. And she wrote to the Empress. She wrote to Eugenie. And I thought, isn't that strange that she decided to write to the Empress to ask for help in getting her husband released rather than writing to the Emperor and asking him to help her? And so I began reading a little bit about Eugenie to see what her role was. And then I was chatting with my friend Evelyn Resnick, who also was working in the world of wine at that time, and said to her, you know, this woman, this Eugenie, seems to have done so much for France. And Evelyn said, well, I've always thought she was far more interesting than her husband. Now, Evelyn, by training, is a historian of 19th century France. So she knew what she was talking about. And from that, the whole idea of investigating the Empress further came to fruition.
I thought for sure Don would say something when you said that she was much more interesting than her husband. So, but it's interesting that you've mentioned a lot just now in the parallel history of France and wine. You wrote the book Wine and War. You've written the book on Champagne and the book Champagne Charlie. And I reading the book Champagne Charlie, understanding that even the French Revolution had much to do with the American Revolution, and that those visits by him. It's kind of interesting. I mean, plus Madame Clicquot in this late 1700s, being a businesswoman who probably, wasn't given a whole lot of credibility or chance of success in doing this, and here she had created a whole industry practically out of it. Is there a relationship between the history of France, so to speak, and wine's parallel history? Are you finding these hooks and pull-throughs with this?
Oh, I think so. You go back and look at it beginning with the Romans in France and really developing it. And you see it through all the time period as the wine begins to increase, the number of acres planted in vines, etc. And a growing portion of the economy becomes, of course, key to what France became. So if you think about it as purely economic, it definitely has a historic relationship, but it goes far beyond economics. I mean, I think it is just so much. It just seemed to have become part of the culture in every which way.
And don't forget all the conflicts that have taken place in France. You ended up with a lot of veuves, a lot of widows who ended up taking over everything, managing, coming up with new inventions to make wine production even better, like Veuve Clicquot,
Yes.
Widow Clicquot. So
Yeah,
I have to tell you, anecdotally, you won't believe this. There's a spa now in Napa, and it's sort of, or my wife and I jump ship and get out of town a little bit, and they've named the spa, and they use the colors of Veuve Clicquot, but they named the spa Rendez Veuve.
Well,
And it just seems,
the French love word games. There's
but it just seems like, dude, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense for one, but meet the widow. I don't know. Anyway, because the reason I asked that question about wine was this young girl I sent off to Chateau Bailly was, and Veronique Sanders Van Beek, her husband is the director of Chateau Giscourt, and so they got to go visit. And part of the history of Chateau Giscourt is to talk about the Empress Eugenie and her fascination with Bordeaux and visiting the chateau quite frequently. And so there seems to be a little wine history in her background as well, not to say the least of, landing in Biarritz and being part of the, southern part of Bordeaux.
No, that's absolutely true. She was very interested in it. In a very general sense, she was interested in agriculture and the development of that, and particularly in finding roles for women in agriculture. But wine became a really important part of it, thanks to their understanding, hers and her husband's understanding, that they needed to sell France to the world, and they needed to sell it as the place you wanted to visit, the place you wanted to go to shop, particularly. And that meant you wanted good products, and which led Napoleon III to pushing for the creation of the 1855 classification of Bordeaux wines, which he was fascinated by, and which it was to become really important at that point in the Universal Exposition to display the products of France, showing the wines as one of the main products of the country and one of the highest quality products. And it became kind of, what should I say, cross-pollinated, because at that time, the person who was in charge of the Bordeaux region in terms of government was a man who became the Baron Haussmann. Mm-hmm. Through that connection as well, that he came to Paris to start redeveloping Paris at the behest of Napoleon III, and in the meantime was asked to pick the wines for the baptism of the Prince Imperial because he knew Bordeaux wine. So it's a thing that continues throughout the reign of Napoleon III and Empress Eugenie, the wine connection and the love of the wine and the willingness to try and promote France through its wine.
I do want to get to, maybe toward the end of this conversation, about the reconstruction of Paris. I mean, it seems like Napoleon III and Empress Eugenie created what we now consider, historical Paris and the layout of it and all that. And I want to talk about that. But let's go back to the beginning and I found it fascinating, this part of the story, get into the sordid details. He basically just wanted to go to bed with her at some point because she was so beautiful, and had asked the question, what does this take? And she said, what, a wedding or wedding bells or something? What is she? I forgot the answer.
He asked, what's essentially the way to your bed? And she said, through the chapel.
Yes. So, and, these are important pieces of information when it comes to historical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, Don?
Yeah.
But then it turns out that because of her fragility, or because of her first, not fragility, because my daughter had a huge baby as well recently, let's say like 12 pounds or something. But her only son, was large, and it put her in extreme danger.
Yeah, she went through 22 hours of labor that was absolutely excruciating, and made even more so because there was still a regulation that the birth of a royal heir had to be witnessed by people. So they were all crowded in the door watching her try to deliver this child. And at one point, it became so crucial that the surgeon or the doctor went out, called the emperor aside and said, I can maybe deliver this baby, but you're going to have to make a choice, because I can't promise you that they're both going to live. Do you want me to save the empress or save the baby? And he did not hesitate to say, save the empress. So the son, the Prince Imperial, was delivered by forceps, and in such an awful way that, unbeknownst at that moment, it broke her pelvis. So she was an invalid for months afterwards.
But she got through it, and thank God that she did, because in the ensuing years, she did so much to help make France a modern country, a progressive country. Baron Haussmann is often, hailed as the guy who rebuilt the city, rebuilt Paris. But Eugenie was right there. She was into science and technology. She encouraged the use of steel, of iron, for many of the building projects.
Oh yeah, the glass and iron construction that made the famous market Les Halles in Paris, and now you see it remains in the train stations and much of Paris, the kind of thing that she believed in, and she believed in putting in a lot of green space around buildings for healthy air, for physical activities, because she was a tremendous athlete.
And those spaces still exist. Those places are still treasured. I mean, it's wonderful.
It's amazing when I was just thinking about reading the book. First of all, the book is it's so easy to read. And I read that review prior, but reading it's seamless in the conversation. You just feel like you're passing through time, but you also go back, you jump back and forth a couple places, and it feels good when you do that. And I just thought about what you just said, Don, which is I could be a regular Parisian. We go there quite frequently. It's like my favorite place to go. Anytime I can route myself through Paris, I do that. And I can totally relate to what she did for the town based on what you just said. But as well, if I read the book and then I went to Paris for the first time, I'd have that same feeling. I would understand, because the descriptions in the book are so well stated and so smooth. I've read Gertrude Stein's book, the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, but it's not really the autobiography. We know this. She's hard to read. You have to really focus when you read her stuff. And here I'm passing through time with this book, and it's fabulously written. One of the things that came out of it for me with the story is Eugenie was this force of nature on her own, right? She was just that person. It came from her DNA. Maybe it came from the times, all the travels she did with her mother and going back and forth, being exposed to different potential mates, whatever the reason was. But this is a woman who clearly, from her roots, was a rather motivated person. I wonder how hard it was in general for women in Paris, in Europe, actually, because she's from Spain, to be able to address that inner drive.
I think it must have been very, very difficult, and the inner drive had to be very strong for them to do it. Certainly in the case of Eugenie, she was, I guess, a tomboy, a wild child. She was always running off to see the gypsies, to learn to dance with them. She would then come home very late, dirty. She would, on the way, stop and leave any money she had with a poor person on the street. She would take off if she was wearing a shawl and wrap it around a baby that was somewhere. She was that was just part of her makeup and the way she lived from the time she was very young. And I think that sounded kind of fairy tale like to me when I first heard it. But then I read the material from her American dentist, who talked about her coming to his office when she was a young girl, and her mother, they'd come to Paris, and she took her in for some dental treatment or something, and how she immediately said to this dentist, you're American, can you help me get some money to some refugees in America? And at the same time, she gave up her place in the waiting room to a man who was obviously suffering a lot, and said, go ahead of me, that's fine, I can wait.
Wow.
So this just seemed to come through in her personality right from the very beginning. And the fact that she was able to maintain her sort of independence throughout all of that, and then again in marrying Napoleon III, is, as you said, a force of nature, an energy that just seems, seems beyond me.
As I recall, you described her personality at one point as saying, it was as fiery as her red hair.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
I mean, think of the hurdles that she had to clear in order to achieve the things that she wanted to. Dreyfus.
Right.
Huh? The Dreyfus affair.
She came out and said France's behavior is shameful. I think this is one of the most fascinating things about her is that in the language of the time, somebody said she had no sensibilities. What they meant was she wasn't sensitive at all to whether somebody was a Jew, a Muslim, a Christian, whether they were any color in the world. It didn't matter to her what their sexual orientation was, whether they were gay or lesbian. These are things that never occurred to her. What mattered to her was the person and what the person was all about. So that she welcomed openly lesbian women into her friendship, made arrangements for Rosa Bonheur, the artist, to have a permit to wear trousers when she painted, because it was illegal for women to wear trousers. But Eugenie herself would steal the trousers from the stable boys and ride astride. So for her, okay, just give her permission.
But you still had, what could be described as societal norms. And because of that, that so much of society was conservative and, dated, it backfired.
Oh, yeah.
And it ultimately, I think, led to her
to her
having to
down.
flee the country and being pilloried by people who said, why did France lose the Franco-Prussian War?
Yeah,
it's this Spanish woman.
Yeah, she was the one who was running the government at the moment of the defeat. She had been put in charge of the government by her husband, who went off to lead the French forces against the Prussians, which was a terrible mistake on his part. But she understood immediately the problems of what was ahead and began preparing for the siege we were talking about, the siege of Paris, where all the animals in the zoo had to be slaughtered to feed people. But she brought in cattle, she brought in sheep, and began pasturing them in the city to provide food for what was ahead. She did everything she could, and yet things got very, very bad. As the war, it became apparent that France had not a chance to win this war. I think, let me see if I can find what the situation was.
What's interesting is here's this driven woman, and based on your book and what you found, that she was a Napoleonic fan as a family. Her mother too, I guess, as part of this group, just thought the Napoleon's War were, the penultimate relationship. And not only that, I mean, considering that, the great general and Waterloo and all the problems that he encountered in his exile, it's interesting that she was fascinated by this family, and then that this hooked up. And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't study it all the way, but what a relationship, right? Here's a strong woman. He doesn't seem to be as strong. He doesn't seem to be as motivated as she is to do the things that they did as a couple.
He was,
is that accurate?
To a very large degree, he was. He had written a paper while he was in prison on eliminating poverty. He was committed to trying to make the lives of ordinary people better. He wanted to modernize France. He felt very strongly about that. He was not, however, the dynamic personality she was. He had, obviously, the name and the background. He was very, very careful about all kinds of things, and he was definitely a hardworking ruler of France.
But he had a lot of physical infirmities, and I think this is why Eugenie had to step in and steer the ship.
He was not a strong man from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about, though, what a lovely man he was, that he was very kind personally. He had a wonderful voice. Everyone was attracted to listening to him, and all of those kinds of things. And the sympathy that he had. He apparently never raised his voice, but obviously got what he wanted no matter what. He did, however, have lots of problems. The the bladder stone was the main one, but he had all kinds of digestive problems. He was never the kind of strong physical person that Eugenie was, although he loved outdoor activities and all of that. He did not have the same, I think, force of personality that she did. And so that also, I think, made it kind of difficult that she was so dramatically strong and so charismatic.
But he put a lot of credit and trust into her general ability to conduct business, politics, social events. I mean, he put her in charge of many things.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was declared the regent of France, the person in charge whenever he had to leave the country or was busy with other things.
How long was his reign?
It was just a little under 20 years. She was the empress for a little more than 17 years. And in fact, when he married her, he said to her, "We have to do things quickly because nobody survives in France more than 20 years."
Wow.
So he wasn't stupid.
He was right.
Yeah.
There's also a lot that I sort of gleaned from this. Let's just take Biarritz for a second, as some of the other places that they developed and moved their home to. There seemed to be a lot of personal wealth in the Napoleon clan. She had some personal wealth. Where did that come from? And was it okay in political France to do that, to just go off and do your thing as an emperor or an empress and spend your own money and build? I mean, I can't wait to get to Biarritz to see their chateau there.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably naive to think that all of the money came floating in legally.
I was hoping you'd say that.
But in the case of Eugenie, she was very, very astute, and she very clearly, when she was given an allowance by the government, began buying jewelry, which she saw as an investment. Now, Napoleon had a lot of personal wealth, but it was mostly property throughout Europe. He'd inherited land in Switzerland and buildings in Italy, etc., partly from his mother. Some came from from the Bonaparte family, but it wasn't disposable income. Eugenie, on the other hand, realized that she needed to build up a sort of security. And so she did buy jewelry, and she also was very careful in how she managed the wealth she did inherit. Part of it is from the vineyards in Spain that she inherited through her mother. She came from a family of business people. And in fact, one of the connections is that her grandfather was a wine merchant in Spain. So she understood about business. She understood about international business because he was buying and selling. He sold wine to the president of the U.S. He was very active.
Wow.
He was the U.S. consul, even though he wasn't American. So she had all of this knowledge about how businesses work. And she, in the exile, it was her wealth that kept them going. She began selling off the pieces of jewelry she had, and she sold huge chunks of it.
Wow.
Worth millions of pounds, pounds sterling.
This is interesting. You mentioned her grandfather being a merchant of wine. Again, wine. Here we are back talking about wine. Yeah. Becomes part of the equation.
Absolutely.
But for a woman's history that's not well told until now, some of this documentation and how you found these articles and these letters. I mean, how far did you go, and how far did you have to go in the archives to dig up some of these really interesting relationships?
Oh, some of it was great fun. Don and I went to Farnborough, where she lived in exile, and managed to visit the home she had there, which is now just a fabulous school for girls. But of course, the first thing Don said is, "Where's the wine cellar?" And they took us,
Of course,
down to see the wine cellar, which was, wow, extraordinary. No bottles.
Yeah, it was empty.
Oh, well.
But we did see some records of what was there, and it was all the best wines you can imagine.
Wow.
Yeah. She sold them at auction.
So finding these documents, libraries, personal collections. I mean, some of this stuff is pretty granular in what you found. I mean, must have taken you everywhere.
Well, happily, working with Evelyn spent quite a bit of time in Switzerland at the Chateau de Renenberg, where Napoleon III spent much of his youth, and went through a lot of stuff there. And I was smart enough to have a daughter who became in charge of rare books and manuscripts and special collections at the University of Pennsylvania, which was where her dentist was. So,
how about that?
yeah,
Wow.
through that wonderful bit of nepotism, we were able to go into the archives at the University of Pennsylvania and read the material that Dr. Evans had built up and collected, the works that he had saved through the years. And he'd written an extensive book about the Empress, but agreed not to publish it. So we saw the book at the university, at Penn's archives, and were able to go through that and the details he had about everything he knew about her. And he'd known her since she was a young girl, so it was extensive.
Yeah, and details about how he helped Eugenie escape from Paris when mobs were besieging the palace and, crying off with her head, to the guillotine.
Marie Antoinette.
One of the things that, Eugenie always had in the back of her mind was what happened to who.
To Marie
Yeah,
Antoinette.
right.
Yeah.
And that would be a motivating factor now, would it be?
It definitely was.
Well, you should. There's something that Eugenie said that we ought to read to you.
Yeah.
Or,
Okay.
yes. I mean,
yeah, this was as the mobs began surging around Place de la Concorde, calling for her head. And afterwards, Eugenie said, "No one who's not heard it can realize the horror of the roar of a crowd that has only one desire, to tear you to pieces." And it was,
Wow.
I think that's what she'd begun worrying about it from the beginning. When Napoleon said to her, "We've got to do this fast because nobody's going to last more than 20 years.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
And she definitely worried about the fate that would befall her. And she was lucky enough to escape. And she was 40 at the time? She still had another 50 years to live.
Wow. It's hard to imagine that, though the way you wrote, you can feel it. And then in Place Concorde, if you go there, it's the same, right, as it was. Maybe the street level's a little bit different, but in general, it's the same as it was. And you can just imagine being there with that kind of tumult going on.
Yeah.
She had such an influence on so much of France, fashion, architecture, civil planning. I wonder what in her personality gave her these skill sets, because it seems that Napoleon III trusted her to do those things, and they were good things. I mean, things that we can experience today when we go there. It just, I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting thread that this woman has so much talent in understanding humanity. Really,
you're right, and that Napoleon recognized it, and unlike many men of the time, particularly, allowed her to do what he knew she could do, and he recognized as well her limits. He knew that she was not a diplomat. She couldn't there's no way she could be diplomatic. She was going to say what she thought, and that was it. But it was that kind of charm, that kind of excitement that drew people to her. And as a result, she could use that skill to get to know people, to get to know artisans, etc., and appreciate what they did and promote it. As you mentioned, the case of fashion. If it hadn't been for Eugenie, there would be no haute couture today. There's this incredible exhibit right now in Paris of the work of Worth, the designer that she brought to her side and who created most of her wardrobe for her. She became essentially a brand ambassador for France. She wore these gowns, let everyone know that they were made by Worth, and that they were, such exquisite things compared to what everyone else was wearing at the time, that it, like the wine, became something that sold France. And she saw it that way, even though she was really not interested in fashion. She could have, as a kid, she just wore anything she could. She was happy to put things together. Maybe she had fun with her clothes, etc. But she was not a fashionista as a young woman. And it was, I guess, she was pushed by Napoleon to really dress well. He said, you've got to, it's France you're showing, it's not yourself. And so she did, and did it so well that, well, you have the results.
What amazes me, what puzzles me, is how a woman so accomplished has been almost entirely forgotten, lost to history. You go up to anybody here in France, well, anybody, nearly everybody, and say, who was Eugenie? They'll say, Eugenie?
That's fascinating.
If they know her, if they know about her, they say, she's the woman who lost his Alsace and Lorraine, talking about the Franco-Prussian War, without realizing that, in effect, she got Alsace and Lorraine back for France because she kept all of the papers. She didn't throw anything away. And she had something from the Kaiser saying that France should be one piece, including Alsace and Lorraine. So at the end of World War I, again, the dentist plays a role.
He had no idea what was going on.
The dentist had a patient named Clemenceau.
Yeah. But much earlier, it was Bismarck, I think, who said it best, who was able to describe how driven and how powerful this woman was. He said, Eugenie is the only man in France. So
that's great. This display, because last time we were there, my wife insisted we go to the Dior museum, and I was immediately bored. But her and her friends stayed for quite a while, even though it's not very large. So you're saying currently there's a display for the designer Worth, who is the gentleman that he himself sounds like a really interesting story, just his drive to do what he did. So that's happening now. Is it a temporary
it's
exposition?
temporary. It ends in September. So many exhibits travel and then go on to another museum. There seems to be no indication this one will, because the clothing that is on display is incredibly fragile. And it's taken several years to put this exhibit together. It's been amazingly successful, and is, I've forgotten what the ending date is in September, but...
We'll have to look it up so I can get out there, and I think that would motivate Mrs. K to want to take another trip. We're doing Armenia sometime this year because they're doing the Concours Mondial de Bruxelles is coming there, and so we're excited to participate in that wine tasting. But the other thing that's very interesting, the way he wrote the book, and I could feel the pain of some of these designs that he created with these metal hoops and the digging into the skin, and it hurt reading it. It was pretty fascinating. But dovetailing off of that, this Asian influence, this Chinese influence of fabric and the embroidery, and then her ability to create iron and steel, which still exists today in Paris, in some of the gardens and the way Paris is laid out. I mean, she seems largely responsible for modern day Paris exploration and voyages just to get around Paris. And you must see her everywhere when you create.
That's absolutely true. In a way that, even though Don and I have lived there for 40 years, it's changed how we look at Paris now. This was done by Eugenie. There wouldn't have been this if she hadn't been here. I think it's opened up our eyes to the city in a new way, and in a fascinating way as well, because of all of the research we did on Eugenie. And as you can tell, Don was not far away. In fact, I was just looking at one of the things that we used for research, which were it was a book about her letters, which was published in the 1930s by her great nephew, the Duke of Alba. And at the beginning, he has a quote from Prosper Mérimée, the writer, the man who wrote Carmen, which says, which he wrote after he saw Eugenie for the last time, that even now, hundreds of pages later, hundreds of years later, when men read about this woman, they will fall in love with her. And right. I think it happened to my husband.
Like Audrey Hepburn, it's like
I did my best to not interfere and stay in the background. But I did at one point say to Petie, I think I'm falling in love with this woman.
Yes. and you don't even have photographs; you just have sketches of her, or paintings of her.
Right. Right.
Do you think she understood? While this time we're almost out of time here, actually already. But do you think she understood the impact she was having, or she was just going through her wants and checking off her bucket list kind of thing?
I hope so. I hope she could have some pleasure or satisfaction.
Particularly after she was in exile. I hope she could look back and see the good things that happened. At the time, I'm not sure she did, because it was so much a part of her, and she was so constantly moving on to something that probably what she really felt was there's just so much more to do. I can't stop because I haven't finished this, I haven't finished that, and there's still this or that to do. I mean, when you think about the fact that she was involved in prison reform and fashion, I mean, these things just don't seem to go together. How she could have been interested in all of it, and yet she was, and managed to just accomplish more than I think any normal person does.
But what I think is really sad is how she continued doing this during all of the years of her exile, and yet when she died, her funeral, a big funeral, took place there near Farnborough. 60,000 people showed up, including the king.
Wow.
Not a single person from France, from the French government, was in attendance.
Wow.
Nobody showed up. It's just amazing.
Many thousands of everyday French people across the channel and went to her funeral, but not a single person from the government was there.
Yeah.
What a sad testimony to, I don't know, what is it, to humanity, I guess, to politics, to who knows. And exile is such a strong word. It's such a impactful word. And that I wonder if she didn't have, conflicting feelings about what she had done and how much she accomplished and how much she wanted to continue to accomplish, but then was basically ostracized by the society. That must have been very weighty on you, like every other thought, right? Do we have anybody the world, a woman like her right now in the U.S., in France, in Europe at all, that has produced such impact? Because not only did she produce so much impact, she did it in a rather short amount of time. I mean, when you consider how hard it is to get traction on some of these larger issues like she did, and then produced from those, is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think she was one of a kind.
Certainly nobody comes to mind that in today's world that you would stop and say, wow,
she's making it happen.
Everything that she's doing.
It's kind of sad. I was thinking about this since you wrote the book, and now this is hard copy and you can get it. I did notice it was on Amazon as an audio book. I don't know if the hard copy was on there yet. Is it out?
Yes, it was released on July 8th.
Okay, July 8th.
So, and we have sold rights to the UK. It will be out in February by Duckworth in Great Britain.
And the point I was going to make was like with this digital, and this is it's not going to be morbid, but it's a little strange about the digital world. Just to highlight a couple things. One is when somebody passes away, I still get Facebook recommendations, even though the person's been out of circulation for 12 months or so. And I thought, wonder what happens with today's history. All the work I do is on the cloud. I mean, everything I have. And I suppose when I pass away, it's just going to sit there and no one's going to know it really existed. But you had all these wonderful archives to go out and find and work with. And I did use ChatGPT to see what it knew about her. And it was quite fascinating. I think it probably scraped maybe your audiobook, because the book's not online per se as a text, is it?
Not as far as I know.
So, yeah. But it had some very pertinent things to say. I only touched on a couple of them today, but I thought, okay, this is interesting. It's kind of out there, but it's not known. And I feel that sometimes this digital age may put some of these stories to pasture because they're not hard copy and they're not available for you to go research and find. And unless the other thing happens, and that's, AI continues to find it and always has it available to us to look at. But anyway, that's a different conversation.
Exactly.
we are looking forward to seeing you again in Paris. And I think you mentioned we have a champagne bar to visit, the Bubble Bliss. Yeah.
Bubble Bliss. And, in fact, Don and I are doing a dinner there talking about our champagne books. Is it the 16th?
The 16th
of September. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Bubbles Bliss. Yeah.
Is this all in French or is it in English?
In English.
In English.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time again. And we look forward to visiting when we're there next. Like I said, we are coming to Armenia, and I'm going to use Air France to get there. So we'll stop into Paris. Last time we were in Armenia, we were supposed to fly through Qatar, but then the war started with the Israelis and that war started with the Iran. So I was fortunate enough to reroute and get a few nights in Paris on the way out. And so I even got Mrs. K to say, because she thinks I'm nuts, that we could take a sabbatical there of 90 days or so one day and just find a flat and just hang out, for 90 days. So we look forward to doing that. But thank you again, and good luck with the rest of the book. France, have they embraced it? Have the French embraced it yet, or?
Not yet. It's one thing we wonder about, and we hope that it will get translated into French by a French publisher and sold there.
Yeah, you would think this would be hitting home unless you're really hitting a sore subject on a woman that they really didn't like that much. Well, thanks again and cheers.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
Thanks again.